Where will the top NFL free agents land this offseason? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch back here with part 2 of my NFL free agency predictions for 2024 NFL free agency. 60 more free agents, their destination, their landing spot, based on what works financially and schematically, what works best, at least in my mind. Let me know if I'm correct, if you think that fit is perfect for your favorite team and that player is perfect for your favorite team scheme. Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to GRONK spike the like button. Let's get 100 likes. I'll give you 30 of my favorite undervalued free agents and their destination in my next predictions video. And don't forget to subscribe for more NFL free agency breakdowns, predictions, and of course, coverage once these players start to actually sign with the teams that they're going to play on in 2024. Now, let's begin with my first free agency prediction out of 60 with the running back position and Deandre Swift. Deandre Swift has the capability of being an electric addition to an offense this offseason. And I believe the Vikings need some electricity in their backfield. He can catch the football. He really, last year, proved he could be a more powerful, balanced runner, take contact. We know he has great vision and fits a zone running scheme under Kevin O'Connell that is ran in Minnesota. And he would be a great addition if they're bringing back Kirk Cousins or they're going to have a rookie quarterback. Either way, having a guy like Swift who can play on all 3 downs, who can catch the football out of the backfield, is effective in the screen game, can run those option routes out of the backfield and be a comfortable underneath target for rather Cousins coming off the Achilles or a rookie quarterback. I think it makes perfect sense to add Swift to the Vikings backfield for 2024. The second running back is Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards, I have signing with his good old pal, Greg Roman, and Harbaugh, another Harbaugh, in LA with the Chargers. I think this is just a great fit for the system. Gus Edwards is not going to cost a lot. He's extremely undervalued almost every single season. He's a touchdown maker, and he is a powerful runner. This is somebody that Greg Roman knows he's going to get 5 yards a clip in his offense. He's not a great receiver, but this offense doesn't really ask their running backs as much to catch the football. They'll probably bring someone in to do that specific role, but Gus Edwards is going to be a first and second down grinder for you in between the tackles. He's going to bring physicality, toughness, and grit back to the Chargers backfield, and he already understands all the concepts, how to hit them, and how to hit touchdowns on those runs inside Greg Roman's offense. So Gus Edwards is a perfect fit for the Chargers, especially considering they don't have a lot of cap and they're going to need a cheaper running back option. They're not going to be able to land one of those top upper echelon running backs, at least in my opinion, just because of the cap situation. The third running back is A.J. Dillon. This one was tricky. I actually considered A.J. Dillon for my Patriots just because he went to Boston College, and I think he'd be a great fit in a cold environment like Green Bay, where once teams wear down in December, in January, and it gets colder in the winter months, he's a big back that's hard to tackle. But I like him in New York to be able to replace Saquon Barkley, at least short term. A.J. Dillon, I think the most underrated asset to his game is the fact that he's a really solid all-around running back. Like, he can run the football effectively in between the tackles. He's a really deceptive pass catcher. I think he's got solid hands, and he can block, and he's a big dude. So if you want to bring some physicality, some great short yardage ability to your backfield, A.J. Dillon's going to be one of those guys. He was one of the least tackled behind the line of scrimmage running backs this past season. He almost always gets positive yards, and I think that's what the Giants are looking for if they move on from Saquon, to go with somebody that can be reliable in all situations and that can move the chains in short yardage. So the Giants are going to sign A.J. Dillon. Devin Singletary is an underrated back on the market right now. He was very good for the Texans last year. I thought he looked his best he ever has in the NFL. He was actually an every down player pretty much for that team, and he carried the load near the end of the year for a playoff team in the backfield. I think the Tennessee Titans, obviously moving on from Derrick Henry, they're going to find a complement for Spears, and I think Devin Singletary is a pro that's not going to cost a lot, that, like I said, can play on third down, can play on first and second down, can catch the football, can run the football, is a good fit for a zone running scheme, which is what the Titans are going to be running because the offensive line coach, Callahan, his father, comes from Cleveland, obviously zone influence there. So Devin Singletary was effective with the Texans in a zone running offense. I think this does make sense if the Titans are looking to complement their young runner with a veteran runner that can play in all situations. Now let's get to the wide receiver position. We're continuing with the Tennessee Titans. Tyler Boyd to the Titans. This is obviously a clear fit because of the offense. Callahan is the new head coach, the offensive coordinator of the Bengals. Boyd only really knows the Bengal way. He only really knows the Bengals. So if he's going to leave, which he probably is going to leave, going to a place that he understands, he knows the coach, he knows the offense, it'll be a seamless, easy fit. And then if you're the Titans, Tyler Boyd could be one of those guys where he could be a reliable, like, second receiver in your offense for Will Levis. He could be a complement to you moving forward and probably get more opportunity in Tennessee than he did in Cincinnati. He'll be able to play the slot really effectively, probably move the chains on third down. He's still a good player. The only thing that's really happened to Tyler Boyd is the fact that they've had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and he hasn't seen as many targets or as many opportunities. So in a place like Tennessee, maybe that coaching staff looks at Boyd and says, this guy can still offer a lot. He was just in kind of a tough spot in Cincinnati. We're going to give him more opportunity in Tennessee, and he'll be instantly our number 2 target in this offense behind potentially DeAndre Hopkins. Or if they bring in another rookie, having Boyd and Hopkins to mentor that player would be great. And then just having reliable veterans around Will Levis as he grows as a player is going to be the best way to get the most out of Levis. So understanding all of those different things, I think Boyd makes a great fit for the Titans. Josh Reynolds to the Falcons. This one is pretty easy in terms of fit and need as well. Zach Robinson is the new offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. He comes from the LA Rams, working under Sean McVay. Josh Reynolds, of course, only has really played in this style of offense, playing with the Rams and the Lions. I don't think the Lions are going to have enough money to bring him back in terms of, I think he's going to get overpaid a little bit by a team that's desperate for a number 2 or a number 3 receiver. I think Detroit's going to be willing to move on potentially. And I think Reynolds, although he has great connection with Jared Goff, this could be a team that's in on Kirk Cousins. They're going to be in on a veteran quarterback, and having a reliable number 2 target in their offense opposite Drake London like Josh Reynolds is going to be big. He can play in the slot especially, but he can also play outside. And Robinson was his assistant receiver coach way back in like 2020, 2021. So there's some connection there, along with the understanding that Reynolds knows the offense. They know that Reynolds knows the offense. They know his production within the offense. So there's a lot of carryover there, and I think he'd be a solid number 2 for Drake London, a compliment to Kyle Pitts in the running game in Atlanta. So I think this would be a really savvy signing for the Falcons. Gabe Davis to the Chicago Bears. This one just feels right. Like, Gabe Davis feels like a guy that I could see Caleb Williams throwing a deep ball to. That's just how I feel. It's just a gut feel. Right? Gabe Davis is a guy that he is pretty much one-dimensional. He's a big physical target that can run vertical. And he was pretty effective for Josh Allen in that role as a number 2 receiver outside, running deep vertical routes and occasionally catching a deep one. And that is what he could bring to Chicago. Probably a replacement for Darnell Mooney. Maybe they're going to draft somebody as well. You could see that happen as well. But Davis, they're going to have to bring in another veteran. And I could see him being that guy. He's a lot different from DJ Moore. He's big. He's an outside perimeter option, which is kind of rare. So I could see this one working with a talented, armed, young quarterback like Williams. If they want to be potent down the field, that's the guy that you sign. Odell Beckham Jr. will sign with the New York Jets. This one just feels right. Odell Beckham, of course, began his career in New York. Everybody remembers with the Giants. He became a superstar. And since he's been chasing rings, Cleveland was tough on him, but then he went to the Rams. He went to the Ravens. He won a Super Bowl. He's been injured a ton. He's not the same player, but I think a reunion at home in some way, shape, or form, going back to New York, not the Giants, but the Jets, would be an opportunity to do some things that check off his bucket list. Go back to the Big Apple. Go back to where it all started. Go back to the bright lights. That would probably be great for his personal life. It'd probably be great for his branding opportunities and all that stuff because Odell is a celebrity at the end of the day. But that would also be great to chase a potential championship or play with an all-time quarterback, which you know is appealing to Odell, playing with Aaron Rodgers. And I think Odell has also proven himself in terms of being a culture guy the last couple of years. It's weird to think of that, but like he was great for the Ravens in their locker room. He was a great leader for the Rams, and players respect him a ton. So I think he probably won't get a ton of money on the market, but he'll sign a one-year contract and be a mercenary for a championship caliber team. And looking at the Jets roster, I could understand why players like Odell would want to go and play there, understanding that they have Rodgers, they have a great defense. So Odell thinking, hey, I can complement Garrett Wilson. There's a clear number 2 opportunity there for me to sit in on, and I can get more opportunities to catch the ball than I did in Baltimore. It makes a lot of sense in a lot of different ways. DJ Chark to the Buffalo Bills, replacing Gabe Davis. This is like a one-year deal, flyer type of thing. I actually think Chark, when he's at his best, could bring a little bit more to the offense in Buffalo than Gabe Davis. I think he's a better route runner than Gabe Davis is. I think he's a tick faster than Gabe Davis is, but they're about the same size. And it's a flyer contract. He's a number 3, a number 4 at this point in his career. He's dealt with some injuries. He hasn't always been reliable, but he's the type of guy that he could be a plug and play for a Josh Allen, and he could really go for like a 700, 800 yard season, put up like 40, 50 catches and a few touchdowns. And he's just a vertical threat to stretch the defense because of his speed, because of his height. And he brings a different speed element, physical element to the offense that it felt like they didn't have near the end of the year and could help them be a cheap replacement for Gabe Davis's role. Valdes-Scantling to the Indianapolis Colts. This one is just kind of like a feel for what the Colts need. Like Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce. This team likes tall receivers. Valdes-Scantling fits that mold. Valdes-Scantling has speed, and I don't think he's going to cost a ton. I definitely think he made the most money he could when he went to Kansas City, and I think at this point, he's like a rotation receiver, but what he would bring to Indianapolis is a big arm quarterback like Anthony Richardson. He'd bring a vertical threat once again, like going down this line of guys that can run, that are tall, that can line up on the outside and run that route tree, I think is a big element to an offense that features a lot of big receivers, but not exactly a lot of speed at that receiver position. Pierce is kind of playing that role, but they could bring in Valdes-Scantling as well to give them something a little bit different. And they have plenty of money to spend on an extra receiver. So Valdes-Scantling could be at home in a place like Indianapolis that is a team that I could look at and say they're on the rise. Like I could see MVS being attracted to that type of situation. Gerald Everett at the tight end position, I have going back to the Rams with Sean McVay. Tyler Higbee is injured. They signed him to a long-term contract, but he won't be playing at the beginning of the year. So it would make sense for McVay to bring in a familiar face that knows his offense and he knows could fill in the role. And Everett, Higbee complemented each other well in the past. So I could see Everett going back on a one-year contract. I do think the Rams are going to be trying to sign some veterans to be able to compete this year right away. I think Everett could bring them a 2 tight end dimension to their offense back. And I also feel like with Higbee kind of coming off a major injury, he'd at least be a reliable guy that they know they could count on if Higbee is not the same player moving forward. So Everett signs back with the Rams. The LA Chargers move on from Everett and sign a more balanced all-around tight end in Noah Fant. I think Noah Fant's an underrated asset for many teams in this free agency period. This tight end group is not the strongest in free agency, but I think Noah Fant could be one that goes to a team that values a blocker and an inline tight end that can also do damage after the catch. And that sounds like a Greg Roman offense to me. Like, Noah Fant is not going to be the sexiest in terms of statistics because he's spending a lot of time blocking. And yeah, he's physically, though, really, really good. Like, he's got great speed, good size, and he's had some deceptively good seasons in the NFL. I don't think Seattle was the best fit for him, but I think a place like LA could be really good for him to be that starting tight end in LA's system. Hayden Hurst returns to the Cincinnati Bengals. This just makes too much sense. He was cut by the Panthers not too long ago, and you could probably sign him super cheap. Joe Burrow obviously had a connection with him. He made his money in Carolina based on the production that he gave the Bengals. He's good after the catch. He's a solid inline tight end who can do a little bit of everything. He's a reliable option over the middle of the field. And I think they did miss his speed a little bit at that position last year. Like, they had a bunch of guys that were reliable, catch the ball over the middle of the field, run option routes, those sit routes against zone coverage. But to me, Hurst brought a little bit more in terms of his ability to run. So I think the Bengals would value that and bring him back on a 1-year, 2-year deal. The tackle position. The Patriots find their veteran left tackle in Charles Leno Jr., who was released by the Washington Commanders. He was actually graded very, very well by PFF last year and might be the most underrated veteran on the market. The Patriots, obviously, with their newfound offensive scheme, are shifting likely more towards a zone blocking scheme because of the West Coast system they're bringing in under Van Pelt, because of some of the Cleveland Brown influence they're bringing in. And Leno would make a lot of sense. I think that he's just proven to be a solid left tackle for many seasons throughout his career. And that's exactly what they need. They need a guy that can start 17 games, a guy that will be reliable, a guy that won't be a weakness, and probably won't cost a ton. Right? So if you want to go for Tyron Smith, go ahead. But this guy will be not as good as Tyron Smith, but probably more reliably on the field and a lot less money. So this makes a lot of sense for the scheme, the fit, the timeline of the Patriots. Just bring a reliable blindside blocker for a potential rookie quarterback. That'd be nice. Next up, Donovan Smith goes to the Commanders. Donovan Smith is from Washington, so this had a little bit of influence here. But the Commanders, they're not shy on signing former chief offensive lineman. We saw that last year. Although this is a different front office, I do think that, it's funny to me. But Donovan Smith, he's not going to sign with the Chiefs, I don't think, unless he has a very, very limited market. I think he's proven that he can be a low-end starting left tackle. And the Commanders just need to raise the floor of their offensive line. And so I believe Donovan Smith could get some money on a 1-year deal to compete for this job or potentially start at the left tackle position. There's nothing really else to be said there. Like, I just think this is a guy that started in the Super Bowl, proved he could be reliable, has played for 2 championship teams. Washington's trying to build a culture, and bringing in a guy that has 2 Super Bowl rings honestly wouldn't be that bad of an idea. George Fant to the Tennessee Titans. I really like this fit for the Titans because Fant isn't the best tackle in the world, but he's going to be cheap. He's more known for his ability to be a swing tackle and like a third tackle on a team, but he actually filled in with the Texans rather admirably last year. So I could see the Texans trying to bring him back as like their third tackle, but I think Fant could get an opportunity to start elsewhere, like Tennessee, that's desperately looking for tackles, desperately looking for offensive line upgrades. And Fant, the one thing he does offer, he is a veteran. He is obviously been around, so that's going to be valuable. But then also, he's got really good feet. He's really good in the run game, and he can move really well, which I think a place like Tennessee is going to value the ability to run block. So I think the Titans go after a George Fant as a reliable veteran at right tackle. Graham Glasgow re-signs with the Detroit Lions. This one's self-explanatory. They signed him to a super, super cheap contract last year. He filled in as a backup. He was awesome. So why would they not re-sign him? He's probably not going to cost, a lot, because other teams are going to look at him and say, he's a product of Detroit. But Detroit's going to say, fine, we'll take him back. Thank you. So honestly, I think he'll be back. I could be wrong about that, but I would probably say with both of the guards being free agents right now for the Lions, they don't really have one. And I think Jonah Jackson's going to lead just because he's going to get too much money. They got to bring back Glasgow. And he can play center as well. They got to bring him back. Damian Lewis to the Ravens. I have no other explanation other than he's an extremely good run blocker, like awesome run blocker. That fits the Ravens, obviously. He is a big human that is going to physically abuse you, and he just feels like he will play for the Baltimore Ravens. Like, there's just players that feel like they're a Raven, and Damian Lewis is that guy. I don't have any other explanation than that. You guys know what I'm saying, I think. All right, next. Dalton Risner to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I do think one of the priorities for the Bucs will be adding some veteran linemen to this offensive line of the Bucs. Obviously, they could use an upgrade at guard and center. And I think Dalton Risner, with the connections that the Bucs now have, Dave Canales has left. He was the offensive coordinator. He came from Seattle, which had influence from the Rams and Sean McVay. And then now they bring in a Rams influence to the offensive line. Risner has played a lot of his career in zone blocking schemes. Last year, he played with O'Connell's offense in Minnesota. This would be a good fit. I think that Risner's always proven to be an above average starting guard when he's fit in this system. And I think he'd be just that for a team in Tampa Bay that low key in that South division, once they get Baker back, they could be pretty competitive this next season. So I think signing a veteran like Risner would raise their floor of the offensive line. Andre James signs with the Chargers. This one I just feel like is a good fit schematically. Andre James is a really good run blocking center and really tough physical, played in a power system under McDaniels and thrived. And I think that would be the same with Greg Roman on the offense of the Chargers. And, a lot of people are probably saying, isn't Corey Linsley the center of the Chargers? Yeah, but he might retire actually because of some concerns with his health. So James would be a low-key signing that a lot of people don't see coming. It's a good fit for the system, and Linsley could be on his way out, which means the Chargers might actually need a center. And I think having a veteran center for a team that is trying to compete in the Chargers is valuable. So Andre James to the Chargers. Next up, Tyler Biadasz to the Jags. The Jags need a center desperately, and I think an upgrade is going to be essential. And I think Tyler Biadasz of the Cowboys is a very good center. Like, he's not great, he's not elite, but he's a good center. And I think he'll fit in the type of offense that Doug Peterson runs. They just re-signed Ezra Cleveland, which I was going to be right about, by the way. I was going to have him in this video as a re-signing. I know I can't really prove that. But anyways, they re-signed Ezra Cleveland. So clearly the priority of this offseason is the offensive line. I think they're going to be able to afford to maybe overpay somebody like Biadasz, who is probably going to have a decent market because he's still fairly young, which matches up with Trevor Lawrence and the timeline of the rest of the offensive line. So that seems to fit. But also Mike McCarthy's offense, I feel like there's some crossover there between what he does offensively and what Doug Peterson does offensively. And the offensive linemen seem to fit the same sort of profile. So Tyler Biadasz to the Jags makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. Mitch Morse to the Steelers. Mitch Morse, I'm not sure if he's going to go back to Buffalo after they sort out all their cap issues. That'll be interesting to watch, but the Steelers do make sense because I think the Steelers are going after maybe Russell Wilson potentially or another veteran quarterback to try to compete with Kenny Pickett or maybe replace Kenny Pickett. Bringing in a veteran center has never been against the way of the Steelers. They could definitely use an upgrade there. They got rid of the center that started last year, and Mitch Morse is a solid player. He's played well for the Bills. Like, for numerous seasons, he played well for Andy Reid's Chiefs way back in the day before going to Buffalo. And Arthur Smith does need an active center who's smart, who can move well in the run game. And if you watch the Bills run the ball last year, you would know that Morse can do that. So makes a lot of sense for me to go to the Steelers. Now to the defensive side of the football, Daquan Jones to the New York Jets. The Jets low-key need a second defensive tackle on their defense right now. John Franklin Myers is kind of their hybrid DND tackle player, but they'd rather keep him on the edge for a majority of the early downs. So they need like a defensive tackle type of guy to replace Quinton Jefferson. Solomon Thomas is also a free agent. So they got a lot of free agents at that position. Daquan Jones is a guy they'll be familiar with because he played in Buffalo. Obviously, the familiarity there being a lot of four-man fronts, a lot of, even fronts, not odd fronts. And Daquan has played in both, but he's probably better in something similar to Buffalo. And I think Robert Saleh will understand that. And while he's not a true penetrator in terms of playing, that type of quick, savvy defensive tackle role, what he is a really good run defender. He could take some pressure off of Quinnen Williams, and he actually proved to be a pretty good pass rusher last year in Buffalo. So I think he would really team up with Quinnen Williams and be an absolute force on the inside and could really shore up that offensive line or that defensive line. So Daquan Jones to the Jets, I like it just in terms of, okay, now we have our front four. Now we can get the rest of our defense settled. But Daquan Jones is a beast, and I don't think he's going to cost a ton. He's another veteran that I think will try to go somewhere where he can still win and be in an interesting scheme and a good defense, and that's definitely the Jets. Next up, Sheldon Rankins to the Lions. This one has connections all the way back to Sheldon Rankins being drafted by the Saints. Sheldon Rankins being a part of a staff that included Aaron Glenn, who's the defensive coordinator of the Lions, and Dan Campbell, who was also a coach for the Saints at one time, and I think played for the Saints at one time, won a Super Bowl with the Saints. So they'll be familiar with Sheldon Rankins. They do need a potential partner on the inside for McNeil, and Rankins is a really reliable player in all situations. He's a solid pass rusher, a solid run defender, doesn't really have a weakness to his game, is a veteran. I thought played well for the Texans. He stood out on tape like every time I watched him. So I don't think he's going to break the bank. I don't think the Lions are looking to spend like a ton of money on this position, but just upgrading subtly would be a wise move. And I think Rankins would allow them to do that with a guy that's familiar with their type of defense. So Rankins to the Lions. Next up, Shelby Harris to the Bucs. This just feels like a Buccaneer. Like this guy just feels like a great fit for this defense. He's a rotation type of defensive tackle, interior defensive lineman, but that would be nice to have along with Cansey and Hall. Obviously, Vita Vea plays a ton of snaps, but Shelby Harris is not exactly typically that Vita Vea role. He'd more be like in the William Golston role, which they've had previously, where he's in on passing downs occasionally. He plays whenever a guy needs a rest or whatever, but he's a really good, like 400 snap guy a season. And that's what you're looking for in Tampa Bay, to have that depth on the interior defensive line, which is really essential to Todd Bowles' system. He likes his big, beefy guys in the middle. I think Harris would fit Tampa Bay pretty well in like a 1 or 2 year contract. Now the edge position. I think Jadeveon Clowney finds his way back to the Ravens. I thought he played amazing last year. I thought he was a really good player for them. And McDonald is gone, and as well as I believe the defensive line coach is also gone to Miami. And so people think he's going to go to Miami, but I don't really see that. Apparently there was a report that for the first time in a while, Jadeveon Clowney was happy to end the season in Baltimore. So I think there's a lot of things to like if you're Clowney. Obviously, you know the defense already. There's not going to be too much change there. You know a lot of the players on the team. You don't have to move again. You don't have to sign another 1-year contract somewhere else. You can play on a team that's winning, and you were successful there. So, and the fan base likes you. There's a lot of things, and you're going to play a lot. So Clowney to the Ravens, just makes too much sense. Why would they not want to bring him back after the season he had? I'm not sure. Unless he just gets overpaid somewhere else on a long-term deal. I think he'll go back on a 1-year deal to the Ravens. Carl Lawson to the Chiefs. This guy just feels like a Chiefs defensive end. He's undervalued right now. He's had some injured seasons. He's coming off a tenure where he was a highly priced free agent, signing with the Jets. It didn't quite work out with the Jets after his Bengals career. And what a better way for the Chiefs to poke at the Bengals than taking one of their former really good players on their defensive line and making them, a rotation rusher with the Chiefs. Carl Lawson probably wants to go somewhere where he can go to a 1-year deal and be in a good defense, which obviously Spags offers, And this just seems to fit both sides, where this is a player that's undervalued, that's looking to get back into, the good graces of the NFL, and a team that loves their value type of players, their gems on the defensive line. He is one of those physical, strong, stiff defensive linemen in the same mold of a Frank Clark, Carl Loftus type of player, Omenihu type of player, where he just fits the mold of one of those DNs that the Chiefs typically pick up. So Carl Lawson will sign with the Chiefs. Marcus Davenport to the Jags. This one has some crossover from history. Marcus Davenport played under Ryan Nielsen of the Saints. Obviously, Davenport was drafted by the Saints, and I think that the Jags could use like another rotation defensive end. And I don't think Davenport's going to get a lot of money. I considered him going back to the Vikings and teaming back up with Brian Flores because I thought that he started the season decent, but he got injured again. But I think this is going to enable him, the fact that he's gotten injured so often, to sign somewhere pretty cheap. But why not go to a place where you're already familiar with the scheme, the defense? They do need help on the edge. And this seems to be the type of freak athlete that their general manager typically covets, right? This is the guy that loves Danielle Hunter. He's been talking about it. Like, this is why they drafted the kid first overall out of Georgia instead of going with Aiden Hutchinson, because of the physical traits. Marcus Davenport has the physical traits. So in terms of like the GM, the defensive coordinator, the player, the upside, this just feels like it screams Jacksonville all the way. Josh Uche signing with the Cardinals. This one's a total out of left field sort of pick, but I do feel like Josh Uche would be a great addition to the Cardinals defensive front. He's a really talented finesse pass rusher, and he could fit the Hassan Reddick role. If they don't go out and trade for Hassan Reddick, Josh Uche would be a younger version that has a ton of upside. He's like really athletic and was thought of at one time to be maybe an off-ball linebacker similar to Hassan Reddick. He's got great, outside bend ability, and then he combines that with quickness and spin moves, and he's really talented overall. Like, he just wasn't really a fit, in my opinion, for New England because he wasn't an every down edge setter for Bill Belichick. But once you got him into passing situations, he was really good. So I think putting him in a Gannon defense, where now they're kind of adding some of those like odd fronts to the table, where he didn't really do that with Philadelphia, but then you could also bring back that type of role where you've got him on the outside of the defense, 5-man fronts. He's rushing the quarterback. Like, Uche could be really dangerous here, dropping back in coverage on blitzing schemes. He could do a lot for this defense. I think he would be a great fit. Yannick Ngakoue to the Commanders. I think the Commanders should be looking for a mix of young, youthful edge rushers, but then also reliable veterans that can get to the quarterback. And Yannick Ngakoue is one of those guys. Like, say what you want about him. Last year he got hurt, wasn't his best season, but he's like a 70 sack guy for his career. He's only 28 years old, and he fits the Seattle scheme defenses. That's always where he's been at his best, in Jacksonville, in Indy under Gus Bradley, with the Raiders under Gus Bradley, now going to Dan Quinn. This is a similar front, right? This is what they do, and Dan Quinn's really good at getting the most out of defensive ends. Yannick Ngakoue would be really good here to just raise the floor of their edge productivity from a pass rushing standpoint. Maybe he's more of a rotational player at this point in his career, but he could provide 8 sacks just like that, a couple strip sacks. So if you're the Commanders, you have some extra dough, one of the most cap spaces in the league to throw at a guy like Yannick Ngakoue. Jerome Baker to the Steelers, linebacker. I think that the Steelers could use some speed. But Baker has also proven that he's really good downhill. He's a great blitzer. He's good against the run. He feels like a Steeler linebacker, but he would add a little bit more Ryan Shazier to their linebacking core, a little bit more of that sideline-to-sideline speed. Obviously, they valued some of the guys that played under Brian Flores before in terms of Landon Roberts. Jerome Baker did the same. So I could see them being intrigued by Baker's athleticism, along with the fact that he might have some flexibility in terms of their blitzing schemes, the way that they play run defense, and he'd just be able to overall upgrade the athleticism of the middle of the field for the Steelers, which has always been a weakness since they lost Ryan Shazier. Josey Jewell signs with the Eagles. I think the Eagles really need to upgrade the floor of their linebacker position, and I don't think anyone really does that better for cheaper than Josey Jewell. I think he's been always an underrated linebacker, all-around good player, really smart, high IQ, good in coverage. He understands Vic Fangio's defense, having played under him in Denver, and this just feels like a one-year linebacker signing to try to get back to closer to the TJ Edwards level play that the Eagles saw at linebacker. Josey Jewell could provide them that for pretty cheap. Next up, Azeez Al-Shaair returns to the 49ers. This one to me was a fit ever since I saw Azeez Al-Shaair in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, being on another NFL team in the huddle of the 49ers linebacker group in a playoff game that he was not a part of. That just screams this guy loves the 49ers. He loves the team. He loves the culture. He loves the players. He loves the coaches. Whatever it may be, he wants to be on the Niners. And if they can make it work, he will return. That's what I got the vibe of. Of course, Dre Greenlaw's coming off a major injury, so there's no better way of getting a replacement than a guy that you already know is really good in your system, a guy that's a freak athletically, really quick to the football, pursues the football like an animal, and had his best season of his career in Tennessee last year because he played the most he's ever played. But now he'll get more opportunity to play in San Francisco, at least early in the year. You'll have a reliable guy in a third linebacker role that it felt like you didn't have last year, and it really hurt your depth. And he loves the team. I think even McCaffrey was his teammate in college. So there's just so many things that you love about this. Devin White to the Raiders. Devin White, I think, would be Antonio Pierce's type of guy. He's super confident. He's just out of this world. He's going to talk. He's going to get in your face. He is a Raider through and through in that vibe. And then also you're talking about the fit of the defense. He fits the type of scheme that they run, and he obviously knows Mike Caldwell very well, the linebacker coach that formerly was a part of the Bucs and probably got the most out of Devin White than anyone ever did. And I think since leaving, Devin White, I don't think he's been the same player in Tampa Bay. So reuniting with that guy could reunite the vigor of Devin White's game. He'd be great for the blitzes, for the run game, and be able to add a bit of speed to the linebacker position of the Raiders. I don't think he's going to cost as much as people probably think, because you see the name and you think, wow. But no, he's not quite been the same player as he was early in his career. Maybe he can be with Caldwell. I'd also think he'd look sick with the visor and the black and all that. He'd look sick with the Raiders. Next, Anthony Walker re-signs with the Browns. He was a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, a captain on this defense. It wouldn't make sense for him to leave. He's coming off an injury, I believe. So even more, in terms of the vulnerability of his potential not getting signed from another team, I think he's just going to find his way back to Cleveland at some point in this offseason. He's been a good player for them in their system, on their team. He's been a leader for them. It wouldn't make sense for them to not re-sign him on a one-year contract. Denzel Perryman to the Colts. Denzel Perryman has played his best under Gus Bradley, whether, with the Raiders especially. But to me, that's the defense that he's played best in. The Chargers, the Raiders, and I think he'll do that for the Colts. The Colts don't have Shaq Leonard anymore, and I think a lot of people are going to say, the Colts don't really need a linebacker. They need other things more, but they need a third and fourth linebacker. This is a defense that, just like the Niners, they need that depth, that third linebacker. I think Perryman is probably that type of player at this point. I don't think he's a guy that you want playing 700, 800 snaps a year, but as your third linebacker, he's a menace. He brings a lot of energy. He's a downhill absolute thumper, and he is wicked against the run game. So I think Denzel Perryman would be a great fit back in Bradley's defense. You know what you're going to get out of that guy. And as a third linebacker, you could certainly do worse. Jordan Brooks to the Dallas Cowboys. I like this fit a lot in Mike Zimmer's defense. I actually saw this as a potential landing spot on PFF, and I agree with it a lot. Jordan Brooks is really athletic, but also really big. I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", 240. So what Dallas is missing is size at linebacker, but Brooks also brings quickness and speed. And he's not the most fluid in coverage, so that's certainly a weakness. But when you think back to the Vikings defenses under Zimmer, you think about Eric Kendricks, big lower body, like big size. Anthony Barr is huge, right? At the linebacker position. Like Brooks seems to fit that type of profile, and he's really good against the run. So I do think that the Cowboys need a guy that's just a savage against the run, add some size. Brooks is really athletic, could be a little bit cheaper because of his injury history. I think Brooks makes a lot of sense with Dallas. Bobby Wagner, another Seattle Seahawk. I have him going from Seattle to Washington and teaming up with Dan Quinn. I think I had a similar prediction last offseason of him going to Dallas. I would have loved to have seen that, but he went back to Seattle, which was awesome. That being said, I don't think Seattle's going to bring him back just because of the shift in philosophy and the defense and the linebacker position under Mike Macdonald. I do think that Dan Quinn, being a head coach, once again, he's a big culture guy. And if you're him, why would you not talk the front office into saying, Bobby Wagner's a Hall of Famer. Bobby Wagner's still a good linebacker. Bobby Wagner's a guy with all the money we have. We can afford to pay maybe a guy that's a little bit past his prime, a little bit older, but he is such a good leader. He is such a good presence in our locker room. He'll be so good for our culture. Like, he'll be exponential to our team compared to even a team that's going for a championship. Like, what he could do for our team long-term would be great, just to bring influence and bring like character to our team. So Bobby Wagner to the Commanders. He fits the defense, obviously. He knows Dan Quinn's system. He's a part of that vibe, but also he'd be great for the vibe of the locker room. Jordan Hicks back to the Vikings. He played phenomenal for the Vikings last year when he was healthy. He's coming off some major stuff in terms of health, but I do believe that makes him even more likely to re-sign with the Vikings. I thought he was a great fit for Flores. He's a really good blitzer, and he's really, really smart. And that makes him a perfect fit for Flores. He's always been super undervalued, and Hicks will go back to the Vikings. Willie Gay Jr. to the Seattle Seahawks. I love this fit for Mike Macdonald. I think Willie Gay is super undervalued. I think he's really fluid in coverage and a pretty underrated run defender as well. He's long. He's got long arms. He's able to kind of get into the passing lanes of opposing quarterbacks and receivers and tip down balls. And he's got really, I feel like, good coverage skills. So I think those are all things that Macdonald is able to play into. The ability to have linebackers that can fill those gaps in zones that he's showing blitz at the line. And Gay's versatile enough to be able to play the run. He's big enough to be able to do that, but he's also fluid enough to backpedal, get in those passing lanes, have long arms to knock those balls down. So I feel like Willie Gay is perfect for the Macdonald style of defense. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJ Gardner-Johnson, whatever people call him nowadays. The safety position is a need for the Jags opposite Andre Sisco, and I believe that Gardner-Johnson could play nickel or safety for the Jags. He obviously has a fit here with the former coach in New Orleans, which is also why I went with Marcus Davenport going to the Jags. But Gardner-Johnson played really well in Philadelphia as a safety, has played well as a nickel in New Orleans. He can do both. And I think Nielsen will understand how to utilize him within their defense. I think he would also bring a leadership in terms of an edginess, a physicality that Jacksonville's defense just feels like it's missing. It feels like it's missing a FU guy, honestly. So that's what they could really utilize in Jacksonville. Whether it's at nickel or safety, it doesn't matter. They need both. Next, the Jets signed Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde used to play with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and at this point in his career, maybe he says, if I'm not going back to Buffalo, which I don't know if he will, I kind of hope he does, but the Jets need safeties, and they need a free safety. And when I think about Robert Saleh's defense, I think about a safety that is going to be good in a lot of cover three and is going to be good as a solo free safety and can cover ground and is really smart. And if you're Micah Hyde, why wouldn't you look at Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed and look at that secondary and be like, ooh, I could play free safety for Sauce Gardner? And that would be pretty cool. So, and then, I know Aaron Rodgers, like, we're going to compete. So I don't know. I like this fit quite a bit. Next, Darnell Savage to the New England Patriots. This one is kind of random. I understand that, but I've always liked Savage. I always felt like he's a little bit underrated in terms of like his physical tools. And I feel like he would be really good in New England's system as the Devin McCourty role, which they didn't have last year. He's really fast. He's really rangy. And I feel like if you could focus him on a specific free safety role, I think he'd be really, really good in that role. So the Patriots typically love to play cover one. They love to play solo safety. They love to play with a deep safety, and they didn't really do that as much last year. Savage, though, does have a lot of experience playing in two high systems with Green Bay, so it's not like he'll be out of the sorts if they play a lot of different coverages. It's just that I feel like Savage could bring something that they've been missing the last year or so without Devin McCourty. I think he brings a lot of range, a lot of speed to that safety position in the back end, and he brings explosiveness. And he's still young, so he would fit the timeline of the Patriots rebuilding, along with bringing them something that they didn't have in their secondary last year. Eddie Jackson signs with the 49ers. Eddie Jackson, I love this fit. I actually was going to give Eddie Jackson to the Eagles, but we'll talk about that in a second here. Eddie Jackson has some crossover with Brandon Staley. And when I think about the Niners safeties, I think about Chicago safeties because Tashawn Gibson was Chicago's safety before stopping in San Francisco, and they signed him right after he left Chicago. So obviously there's something about the two schemes from, at least from 2017 on till now currently that has some crossover. I think it's the fact that Fangio, D'Amico Ryans, they play a lot of quarters coverages. Eddie Jackson was obviously peak in that system under Fangio, and I feel like Eddie Jackson would be a great fit in San Francisco. He's also a veteran. He's a little bit older. He's a ball hawk. He's probably not going to cost too much, but he has super upside. Like, we've still seen Eddie Jackson. Like, last year, he played extremely well in 2023. And now in 2024, 2023, he didn't play as well. 2022, he played amazing. But he always has that opportunity to kind of, if he's surrounded by Hufanga at the other safety spot and he's playing free safety and he's got Charvarius Ward to one side and he's in this system where there's a lot of good defensive players. Like, you could see Eddie Jackson just being that missing piece, a guy that can just play the ball, jump those routes, like take him to the house. Like, Eddie Jackson has a lot of upside in this type of scheme. Not going to be super costly, a little bit older, probably wants to go somewhere where he can win. Brandon Staley's going to know him. There's going to be things that they like. So Eddie Jackson to the Niners. Jamal Adams to the Tennessee Titans. This one is more about Jamal Adams finding a place where he can get back to being his best self. And Denard Wilson was the Ravens and the Eagles defensive back coach the last 2 years. Obviously, we know what the Eagles did in 2022, going to the Super Bowl and being one of the best defenses in the league and really propping up a lot of guys like James Bradbury, etc. Safeties like Gardner Johnson, right? So think about what he did in Philly. Think about what he did in Baltimore this past year, having the number one defense. And then think about what he did with the New York Jets, along with Jamal Adams in 2017 through 2020. Those were Adams' best seasons in the NFL. So if Adams is looking at this realistically and saying, where can I play my best ball? Where can I potentially go succeed and maybe cash in once again as a player, or just, play my best football? And I think Adams is a competitor. I don't think he's going to have a huge market. And so I think both of them are suitable for each other, where the Titans need safeties. I think Wilson will know how to use them as a box safety. And I think that's just the best for both sides. So Tennessee signs Jamal Adams. Jordan Poyer to the Miami Dolphins. Poyer basically begged the Dolphins to sign him last offseason. They now have a vacancy at the strong safety position opposite Javon Holland at free safety. Poyer is more known for his ability in the box. He is a veteran, obviously will want to go somewhere that can still win right now, and Miami is a place that can definitely still win. You could convince yourself of that. So I think Poyer is a good fit for the Miami Dolphins opposite Javon Holland in that box role. Not quite the player he used to be, but is still really smart, savvy, solid tackler, And again, he wants to play there, so it won't cost a lot. Kevin Byard to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This feels like a great fit for Kevin Byard. There's a little bit of familiarity in terms of Byard played on the Titans teams that Arthur Smith was a part of as well, but that's obviously offense versus defense, but at least there's a familiar face in the building. On top of that, Kevin Byard would be the type of safety that I think could thrive opposite Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think that playing more in a box role at this point in his career would be a wise decision, as he doesn't have the same athleticism, speed, or quickness that he used to, but he's still really smart. I think he could be solid in this Mike Tomlin defense where he played under Mike Vrabel, and a defense that likes to disguise a lot of things, likes to be pretty creative in terms of their looks and their ability to have a guy in the box, drop back into coverage, maybe play the run effectively as well. And Byard is one of the highest IQ players in the secondary in the NFL, so might not have the same physical traits, but this is the type of safety that could actually upgrade the Steelers secondary in 2024. Quandre Diggs to the Bengals. This one's just random. I think the Bengals need a free safety. They lost Jesse Bates last year, and I think they could utilize another safety in their rotation. Quandre Diggs is a really good free safety, and he's really good in those post looks, those high looks, and as that solo free safety. He's a ball hawk. He's got pretty good range still. He's still a really good player. I do think he kind of gives me the vibes that he wants to go somewhere to win, and the Bengals would make a lot of sense, especially if it's only on a 1 or 2 year deal at this point in his career. But he could bring some ball hawking back to the Bengals secondary that definitely needs it. Justin Simmons signs with the Eagles. I just think it's too good not to happen. Like, Vic Fangio and Justin Simmons were dynamic in Denver. Like, Simmons was amazing in that system, and the Eagles need safeties desperately, and they need safeties who can do a lot, right? Very versatile. Can play from free safety looks or 2 deep looks, be able to come down in the box and play the run effectively, tackle efficiently, and be a ball hawk at the same time. So Simmons can still play at a very high level. I don't care that he's 30. He's worth every penny. The corner position, Adoree Jackson to the Raiders. Patrick Graham coached Adoree Jackson with the Giants. I think Adoree Jackson played well when he was in that system. Can play some man coverage. He's got the quickness, the speed, and the press ability to be able to do that, but has proven that he can be an all-around corner, playing in Tennessee, playing with the Giants. He's always kind of found a home inside of that Mike Vrabel, Patrick Graham, New England kind of thing. Brian Daboll's, probably looking to move on in terms of the defense. And I feel like Adoree Jackson could really bring just a reliable veteran corner to a secondary that could use it. Hobbs, Jack Jones, Adoree Jackson, that sounds pretty good to me for 2024 for the Raiders cornerback group. Avonte Maddox to the Texans. The literal only reason is when I looked at Avonte Maddox, I was like, he feels like a Texan. I don't know what it is. He feels like a Texan. I don't know if anyone else gets those same feelings, but Avonte Maddox feels like a Texan. First of all, really smart player, good at the nickel position. The Texans need a nickel player. He feels like a guy that's active against the run game. DeMeco Ryans will like that. He's really smart. He's maybe a little bit limited in terms of man coverage, but the Texans, they play a hint of it, but they don't play a ton of it. So he's fine there. And he's been good. When he's healthy, he's been really good. So I think he would actually be an upgrade for them at that position. So Avonte Maddox to the Texans, played a lot of quarters with Gannon in Philadelphia, and really the Eagles system. And I feel like that's the same deal for the Texans. So Maddox scheme fit makes sense. Just, he feels like a Texan. I don't know why. Next up, we got Kenny Moore back to the Indianapolis Colts. I considered the Cowboys as an alternative location, but to me, why would they not re-sign him? Kenny Moore's been one of the best nickel corners in the NFL for years. Maybe the Colts just want to move on from because he's a little bit older, but you can't replace leadership. You can't replace reliability, consistency that Kenny Moore brings your defense. Gus Bradley will value that. The Colts will value that. I think the Colts have plenty of money to spend on a player that's been good to them for many years. Michael Davis to the Colts. I'm going to put Michael Davis on the Colts as well. I think he obviously played under Gus Bradley with the Chargers. I think Davis fits best in these cover 3 press bail type of defenses. He's got good size but limited speed, and he's better in zone than man. And this is obviously a team that plays more zone than just about any team in the NFL. He's been a good corner, in my opinion, in moments in his career. A very good number 2, but he could also bring just a stability to the secondary that they could utilize. Steven Nelson to the Cardinals. Nelson played under Gannon at one point in 2021 in Philadelphia. He played really well with the Texans in another zone-heavy defense. He's played, I think, with the Steelers as well. But he is a zone corner, and the Cardinals play a lot of zone. I don't think that's going to change because they really don't have great corners on the outside to be able to be active and play a lot of press man or anything like that. So Nelson would just bring a reliable veteran for cheap that knows the system, that could start right away and raise the floor of the secondary pretty easily. Christian Fulton to the Steelers. This one, I don't know. There's not a lot of like crossover or carryover or anything, but I think the Steelers could maybe make a run at a younger corner that has some upside, that is better in zone than man, and that's typically what they play, but he has enough experience playing in a diverse defense and secondary like the Titans, where if they want to play more man, they can do that. And Fulton, I think at times has been a really good player. I thought he struggled last year, but the year previous, he was pretty good. So he could be, I think, like a high upside option for rather cheap for a team like the Steelers that doesn't like to spend a lot on corner, but might be looking to upgrade the perimeter position. Ronald Darby to the Dolphins. There is carryover here in terms of Anthony Weaver becoming the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins. Darby was actually really, really good for the Ravens when he filled in for Marlon Humphrey this past season. I think that Weaver will have good knowledge of that understanding. And obviously with Jalen Ramsey there, but Xavier Howard gone, they could utilize a number 2 corner in this system, one that probably doesn't cost a lot. And due to his age, I don't think Darby will cost a lot, but he could be a very reliable number 2 corner for a team like the Dolphins that will be running very similar stuff to the Ravens. Next, Sean Bunting, which is weird not to say Murphy in there, but Sean Bunting to the Giants. He will follow his defensive coordinator Shane Bowen from the Tennessee Titans. And Bunting was like arguably their best corner last year in Tennessee. It was him or McCreary, is it? He was good too, but Bunting can play inside. He can play outside. He brings versatility. I think primarily on the outside is where he's at his best. And the Giants could utilize a number 2 corner, maybe a cheaper one to replace Adoree Jackson, still providing veteran depth, veteran, ability, but still pretty young and still feel like he could grow his game a little bit. And I feel like the familiarity with the system, the fact that he won't cost a lot, and having a guy opposite Banks that kind of looks similar, has similar, similar height, similar traits, length, pretty good speed, feels like the type of player that they would want. Next, J.C. Jackson to the Vikings. I think J.C. could very well return to the New England Patriots for cheaper. I also thought about the Raiders as well in Patrick Graham's defense to team up with Jack Jones once again, but I think that J.C. Jackson with Brian Flores would be the wisest decision for his career. Brian Flores knows how to utilize him. Obviously, he was the defensive coordinator in, J.C. Jackson's rise to prominence there in New England, and he's a good press man corner. And I think the Vikings could utilize outside corners. I feel like they could utilize size at that position. So I think J.C. Jackson would be a good fit with the Vikings, and it'll probably be a low-cost, high upside option for the Vikings. I actually think that JC will be a steal this offseason because he's now going to be another year removed of surgery, injury. He looked decent in moments for New England last year, but it just felt like he's still working his way back from physical injury. Next, Darius Williams, who was also released. from Jacksonville. I think he's still a good player. I thought he was really good for Jacksonville last year as a number 2 corner, and that's what he is, a really good number 2 corner in zone coverage. He's really good at playing the ball and making plays on the ball, and he'd be great in the Falcons system under Raheem Morris, where he did play for the Rams previously, and he would be great for A.J. Terrell on the other side. Like, that's perfect. What you want Darius Williams for. He's not going to be matching up with number 1 receivers, but number 2 guys, potentially some of the smaller, shiftier guys. That's exactly what Williams can do, and he knows the system. He's very smart. And for a team like Atlanta that feels like they might be pushing the chips in a little bit this year in terms of like, are we going to get Cousins? Are we going to maybe try to make the playoffs this year? A guy like Williams would definitely make their secondary a heck of a lot better. And then the final player, the 60th player for my free agency predictions, Tre'Davious White, signing with the 49ers. Now, I'm going to say this. This is maybe like a pipe dream, but Tre'Davious White, the player that he reminds me the most at his peak, has always been Richard Sherman because of his zone coverage abilities and his intelligence. And obviously, Richard Sherman played for the 49ers. White is best in zone coverage, in press coverage, and dropping into zone. He's also really good at reading and reacting to route combinations and the quarterback and jumping the football and sticking his foot in the ground and accelerating. And to me, he could really be a great number 2 to Charvarius Ward in San Francisco. I think they need a number 2 perimeter corner. And White, due to the Achilles injury and the numerous injuries he's had, he could be really cheap, but he probably still wants to go to a team where he could be good, that he knows he can come back and really raise some eyebrows and he could win a lot of games. And so White gives me that vibe. I think that San Francisco's system fits. I think his size profile fits with Ward, with Lenore, with the corners, Sherman, the guys that they like. Like, there's a lot of things that I think make sense here. The Niners should be willing to take a chance on a guy that's been injured, but hey, we don't necessarily need him to play right away. But if he could get back to closer to himself at some point, we'll take a chance on him. And if he can really complete our defense, he's not going to be expensive. Like, a lot of Niners fans, like, were saying no to the possibility of this. He's not going to be expensive. Like, he's been injured a lot. And if you're willing to sign Jason Verrett time after time after time, why not take a chance on Tre'Davious White, who's better than, honestly, Verrett ever was? So, Tre'Davious White to the 49ers. Thank you guys for watching another free agency predictions video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, GRONK spike the like button. Let's get to 100 likes, guys. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Peace.